When I talk about what makes a quality weightlifting belt, I talk about materials, design, construction. There's one component that kind of spans all three, and that's the rivets. Now, I will tell you, this is one of our belts. It uses a specific type of rivet that I think is the best one for a weightlifting belt, but we'll go through all three of them, and I'll tell you why. The rivet that we use is a variation on a pop rivet. So if I were to take a normal pop rivet and I were to set it, okay, it deforms like that. Now, if we were joining two things that don't deform, say like two pieces of metal or something like that, this would be fine. But for leather that is flexible and can deform to some extent, this is not enough. So what we do is we take the pop rivet and we put a cap on the other end, just like that. So when we set this, this forms a very solid and very permanent connection. The thing to notice about our rivets is the difference between the size of the middle of the rivet, that's the size of the hole that you have to punch in the leather, and the size of the rivet head. You want this rivet head to be large compared to the size of the hole you have to punch. That's what prevents this rivet from ever trying to pull through the leather. There are plenty of other rivets where the size of the hole you have to punch relative to the size of the head is much smaller. And if you use something like this on leather, the chances that at some point this can pull through the hole that you punched are much higher. That is why we use these types of rivets on our belts. The head of the rivet is large enough that we're never worried about this actually pulling through the hole that we punched in the leather, and it's a very secure, permanent connection. There are other types like this where the head is much smaller, and one of the larger problems with these rivets, and you can see this on the bottom, is that the other end of the rivet, the shop head of the rivet, is actually splashed. So it is splayed out into multiple fingers instead of being just one smooth, continuous surface. That can cause a couple of issues. For one, this is not smooth. If you run your finger over this, there are a lot of different sharp edges, whereas on the bottom of the belts, using our rivets, this is completely smooth. So these are edges that can catch on clothing and anything like that. And the problem with having a bunch of small little fingers like this is that they're all kind of vulnerable. Some of these on this belt have actually already broken off. And what will happen is once one breaks off, the remaining ones now carry more load than they used to. So the time for the next one to break off is going to be even shorter than it took for the first one to break off. This is an issue that I would classify under the category of design. It's not that these are bad rivets per se, but for the purposes of a weightlifting belt, this is not the right type of rivet, in my opinion. The third belt I actually don't have too much of a problem with this rivet. This type of rivet, I don't have exactly what this is in the shop, but if you took one of our two-piece rivets and imagine instead of this shank here being hollow, it was solid, and you took a washer and you put that on top of it, and then you deformed this head down so that it clamps the washer, that's essentially what this is. And these are fine as long as those are large enough so that we're not ever worried about these pulling through the leather. This can be a fine type of rivet. It's also a very common type of rivet that's used in leatherworking. I don't really have a problem with this type of rivet from a structural, mechanical standpoint. Where I do think it might have an issue is, again, if I rub my finger over this, these heads, these manufactured shop heads, have very rough edges to them. What's going to happen to this belt as we feed the end of it again and again through this keeper? It's going to scratch on these different edges. So that can fray the stitching, that can scratch the suede. If you have suede on the inside, it can scratch the smooth leather if that's what you have on the inside. So it has a feature to it that is not something that you would have on these rivets that are just perfectly smooth on all surfaces. The other thing with these types of rivets, it's very technique dependent. So if you have someone that's very, very good at setting these types of rivets, it can be very good, it can be very smooth, but again, especially on a lot of these like mass-produced overseas belts, the people sometimes setting these don't have a lot of experience and a lot of technique setting them and getting them smooth and understanding what the entire function of the rivet is with respect to the belt. So for that reason, you're going to get heads that are not consistent, that are rough feeling, and will cause issues like we talked about earlier. So the bottom line is, if I want to join two pieces of thick leather and have them never come apart, I'm going to use something like the two-piece rivets that we were talking about before. Okay, that's a very secure connection that's not going to come apart. All right, and that's why we use the rivets that we use. First and foremost, it's a secure connection that will not come apart. Second, the head of the rivet is large enough that we're never worried about this pulling through the hole that we punched in the leather. And the third thing is, it gives us just a nice smooth surface on both the top and the bottom, right? The other rivets we talk about, the splashed rivets, not only are they too small, but they're rough on the bottom, and the fingers that are created start to break off. And once one breaks off, the next one comes quicker. On this one, depending on the skill of the person that is setting them, this can be variable in terms of how smooth and how well these types of ribs are set. So I hope this video has been helpful. This is a detail about belts that many people don't think about. If you want to check out our belts, DominionStrengthTraining.com. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Thank you.